All right, so the video started. Welcome to Accounting 314, Cost Accounting. Let's go through the syllabus and schedule real quick, and I'll talk about myself a little bit, and then we'll go right into the material. So we have Google Docs, a Google, Doc, and a Google Sheet for the syllabus and the schedule. So if I have to make updates and changes, they'll be easy to make. There's my full name, Brian D. Knox. I am a doctor. I got my PhD at the University of Pittsburgh. You can just call me Brian. I'm not really going to be picky about that. I'm not going to begrudge anybody who is picky about it, but me personally, I think that most of the workplaces you're going to go into, you'll be on a first name basis with everybody in the office, and if you're not, it might not be the best workplace to be in. But let's set you up for that with the class here. I say that every semester, and every semester most people are still putting professor and doctor, and maybe they feel like I don't mean it. Maybe they're just habituated to calling me by a title. That's fine. I'm not going to not answer if you call me professor. Class times, of course, you're here, so you know it's Tuesday at 3 o'clock. It's also Thursday. Now, office hours here, by appointment or immediately following class times. There aren't a lot of times when people come into office hours with this class. We end up covering a lot of stuff. We end up covering a lot of the questions people have in class. And right before and after tends to be enough. But occasionally, I need to set an appointment for people. And I'll tell you this, I'm typically in my office. Yeah, typically is the right word for that. I'm typically in my office a couple hours before this. So if there's an appointment, if you want to make an appointment with me, that's probably the time I'll point you to. And if you're just up in the accounting offices, because like to chat with accounting faculty, who doesn't? You can see me there, and you can just stop in. That's fine. I'm not doing anything important or anything. Wait, that sounded like I was being really sarcastic. No. I can stop and answer your question. I think the non-sarcastic way to say it, make sure it's very clear, is I'm usually not doing anything that I cannot change when I do it. That's the great perk of being a professor, is besides 3 o'clock to 4:15 twice a week, I get to organize when I do the work that I have to do basically whenever I want. So I have to get a bunch of research done, for example, to get tenure or get promoted after that. And I can pick whether I do that on Saturday nights or early in the mornings or whenever. They just have to get it done. So likewise, if I'm in my office there, I might have things I'm working on, but it's not like there's some medical emergency that if I don't do it right then, somebody will die. I can put it off to another time. I have lots of flexibility with my schedule, and if you have a question right then, that definitely takes precedence. I'm happy to have you in there. Okay, you can call the office number. I think this still works. I switched to the WebEx phone on my computer, on my office computer. I think it still forwards to me. Email, my email. My email. That seems very straightforward. B Knox. That's great. If you look at the left-hand side there, it seems the simplest email address in the world. And yet, every semester, no, not begrudging anybody, but it happens. It is this right-hand side that actually makes you confused or ends up with some lost emails. Every semester it ends up this way. You want to put bknox@u.boisestate.edu, and I think it even populates as bknox@u.boisestate.edu. And you think it populated, Google says there's somebody in Boise State who has that address. That must be my professor. It's not your professor. I have never met that person, and that person never returns your emails. I don't know who it is, but they're laughing at you, I guess, when they get the email. You probably wanted to answer that question, and it never reaches me. So if I haven't responded to an email, make sure you send it to the right person and forward it to me right after if you send it to the wrong person. Or leading into the next one, you're free to send a reminder. If I've somehow violated, which occasionally I do, if I somehow violate this within 24 hours rule about responding to emails, you send me a reminder and make me pay attention to your email. I tried to set up all the deadlines so I'm not responding to a bunch of email on weekends. Perks of being a professor, right? I can set my hours, so I'm going to be out of contact on weekends and holidays. So I'll try, though, as we get to near the deadline, which are all at the end of the week on Friday. I know that on Friday I tend to get a bunch of emails. You're finishing it up. You're trying to get the quiz done. And I try my best to get back to you sooner than later. If you email me at least early on Friday, I'll try to get back to you before the end of the day Friday, and as quickly as I can, often within a few minutes or within an hour, because I know you're on a deadline for the quiz. I don't sit there and get that email at 12:01 midnight, just barely into Friday, and say, I got 24 hours to respond to this. I'm not going to respond till Saturday for this person. Now, or rather, no, till after the weekend, Monday morning. That's when I will respond. No, I try not to do that. All right, so the description of this course for me is very meaningful, but for you might not mean a lot. It lays out largely what we end up doing in the desired learning outcomes, but I'll read it. This class covers common costing methods, variance analysis, lean accounting, and responsibility accounting. Emphasizes how costs affect managers' decisions. Also emphasizes applying course topics to more realistic and less structured situations. Considers ethical and strategic aspects of cost accounting. That leads into the learning outcomes, which map fairly closely to that. We're going to want you to be able to apply relevant and strategic cost analysis to common business situations, and that maps to Chapter 2 primarily. Want to calculate target profit and break-even figures for single product and multi-product firms, and that maps to Chapter 3. Calculate inventory cost figures using common costing methods, that maps to Chapters 4, which we don't directly cover, but we cover it by proxy, I guess, and definitely Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Those that we're going to go over for a good number of weeks, be stuck in inventory costing because it's just so lovely. We're going to be able to apply variance analysis, including journal entries. Yep, there's some journal entry questions on occasion. Chapter 7 about variance analysis. I have the entries there for your direct labor and direct material journal entries. And actually, if you remember the basics of debits and credits, if you're not an accounting person, if you are an accounting person, then of course you remember debits and credits. It's your life. But if you're not an accounting person, you remember the basics of debits and credits and T accounts and journal entries. I'm not doing anything fancy in these questions, and actually having the journal entries there lets you rule out certain answer choices a lot of times, makes the questions easier sometimes. Also, there are some journal entry questions in Chapter 8 when we go over lean accounting. That's the next thing. Apply lean accounting techniques, including backflush costing and throughput accounting. So there's this little subsection of within cost accounting, some firms use lean accounting and how they figure out what the firm is doing and how profitable different products are. And we go over some of the unique kind of odd things that are almost counterintuitive to a lot of accountants, because otherwise, if you encounter a lean accounting firm, you'll say, this is really weird. And you won't know what to do with it. All right, lastly, we'll calculate responsibility accounting metrics, service department cost allocations, and transfer prices. That's all in Chapter 10. We have a textbook, the Open Cost Accounting textbook, and it is at opencostaccounting.org. You can put in .net and .com. I own all three, and it forwards to .org. It's okay if you forget what the appendix, what it's appended as. I wrote it, for better or worse. In fact, let's go over there real quick and just read the splash page. All right, so this is you've come to our place. This is me, and there's my profile. So this textbook is supposed to be open and easy to use, and on average, it seems like most people respond that it is relatively easy to use. Open means open in terms of copyright. So that's what makes it free. I've assigned a very liberal copyright to it, a very free copyright here, CC BY 4.0. That's very flexible. Anybody's allowed to use this material, and therefore I don't have to charge a price for it, or I'm not going to charge a price for it, and you're free to use it. Literally free money-wise. Okay, then down here, this ties in with why I wanted us to come over here. Is this textbook worth it? All right, so here are the advantages. It's free. That's really important. I can easily update it and have creative control. So if you see a typo, I can go in and I can fix it right then instead of you waiting. maybe one of you would want to do this, but mostly we just see a typo in a normal textbook and we're like, aha, dumb professor. But if you were trying to fix it, you would say, oh, I got to contact the publisher. Here's this typo. And they may or may not get your email. The grad student looking at the email might ignore it or disagree with you or whatever. And then maybe by next time there's a new edition, they change and fix the typo. No, we get to do it real time, or not real time. I don't do it in class. Very quickly within a day or two. And the creative control part. All right, so the creative control part is one of the things that really motivated me. I didn't like some of the ways that some of these topics were the initial spark to do it, I should say, was coming across some topics, and I said, I don't really like the way they're explaining this. They're doing it in a too stuffy of a way. So I would rather explain it this way. And so I said, well, if I'm doing that already, I'm already being interpreter from textbook to student, I could just write down all these interpretations and make it into my own textbook and make it free. So I did. That's kind of the impetus of the idea, and several other reasons stack on later. But so this content can be used freely at various institutions, freely customized to meet this unique need. Are any of you at another institution teaching cost accounting? That's not really a bullet point for you. Okay. The other advantage that is not up here but is worth noting is it's in my voice. So the same thing I'm going to say here in class maps or is the same as what's said in the textbook. So it's not like, well, the teacher says it this way, but the textbook says it this way. No, they're going to be the same. That's an advantage. It also is an unwritten disadvantage here. Occasionally, that works to your detriment, because if I'm unclear somehow, you've got unclear person in class and unclear person in textbook telling you something that's not clear to you. So I've tried my best to make sure that I'm as open as possible, and you know that I'm willing as much as possible to work through any misunderstandings that we have, or I want to make time for you to get an alternative explanation from me in class here. So I go over, that's why I set aside a lot of time to go over practice problems so that we can, if it wasn't clear when I said it, either in person or via textbook, then you can see in practice and maybe then it will click. I know in some classes, such and such topic wasn't clear in class, so I'm going to go read it in the textbook. Or at least I have done that. Maybe you haven't, but I've had that experience. And that is a benefit to having two voices saying, teaching there, the professor and the textbook. So that's a possible disadvantage, is it's all one voice. All right, the other thing is it's just me doing the work. There's no editor. There's no army of grad students writing problems. That means that the website's not formally peer reviewed. The other disadvantage is it's online only. That can be a disadvantage. I mean, in many ways it's an advantage to you, but a good number of people like having a physical textbook. I'm actually one of them. I think physical textbooks or physical books have I believe the literature, the research that goes out there, that's been out there that says that they tend to have greater staying power in your memory when you have a physical textbook to associate with it. You have multiple senses in your spatial reasoning that you can map your memory to for the concept instead of an infinite scroll of the internet. But in order to do this, in order to get all the advantages, I can't make the textbook physical copy. So it has to be online only. That's just the price we have to pay. Okay, so here is how the grade works. It's on a plus minus scale, slightly modified in that I don't have a plus and minus D. It's just all D. And I put the pluses and the minuses at 3%. So these are out of 1,000. So you can just move the decimal place over 1, you get the percent. So A minus is 90 to basically up to almost 930. So the first 90% to 93%, the first 3% of 90 is the A minus. And the middle 4%, 93% to 97% is the A itself. And the top 3% of that decile is 97, and 97% above is A plus. And that's the way I set it up that way. Other classes, actually, I should say it this way. The reason why I go out of my way to point that out is the default, for some reason, Boise State grading scale has one of those pluses or minuses being 4. I think that the minus goes up to like, the A minus would go up to like 94% or something like that. Every time I have to change it in Canvas. and make it my setup. So go by this. The class is out of 1,000 points. I'm not going to round up grades beyond what I promised, which is I'll round them up to the nearest whole point. And I mean up to the nearest whole point, not round them to the nearest whole, round them up to the nearest whole point. So my example is, if you earn 928.2, I'll round you up to the nearest whole point. That 0.2 shouldn't round up, but I will force it to round up, and that's all I can promise you. Beyond that, it's the grade you earn. I'm not going to get a bunch of emails. Well, I might get them, but I'm not going to acquiesce to them, asking me to, I got a 929 now. Can you round it up? And no, I'm not going to. Here's how the grade comes in. So attendance and participation, 180. Talk about the details of that in a minute. Quizzes and assignments, 470. And then final exam, 350. So we're building up to a comprehensive final exam at the end of the course. We'll cover that in just 1 second. So let's talk about each of these points. So attendance and participation, I'll read that bullet point. A good faith effort to fully participate in class is required to earn these points. All right. Well, it being a video recording semester, I know your participation might be a little different. So be it. I'll do my best to still give you plenty of opportunities to participate, and I really haven't come to a point where I've said in a previous semester, well, you guys didn't participate enough, you don't earn the attendance points. You're here, you're not like watching the game as far as I can tell. You're not sleeping, at least not obviously. So I think we're okay. I think we'll just move forward in good faith, unless you give me a reason not to think we can move forward in good faith. So you're allowed up to 3 classes to miss without it counting against your attendance grade. You're allowed to be sick. You're allowed to have job interviews. Oh, that's also important in your life, right? So I in the attendance section of Canvas, I marked you present, but then I click that it was an allowed absence, and then once you've gotten up to 3 of those, if you miss, then I say, oh, you were absent. After that third one is when I start marking you absent. Make sure the camera doesn't flip back to the middle. And of course, you're allowed to miss classes due to university-approved absences. Questions on that? Okay. Sometimes we have athletes, I should say. That's the word for sports people. We have athletes in here sometimes. Also, if you get sick and the university says you have to stay home, of course, I'm not going to count you as being absent when the university says you can't come. All right, so I intend to record lectures and post them to YouTube for use by the online version of Accounting 314 and 513. 513 is this same class, but for the Foundations in Accounting master's degree, where they anyway, you're not in that program, but there are a few students there who are also attending the class. And if you want to review these videos as well, there was that really funny joke I want to hear again, or whatever, or more to the point, I want to see how he did that problem that we went over in class. Let me get to that point in the video. You are welcome to do that. Like I said, I'm going to try to post them at the very end of class as soon as we're done. Quizzes. All right. So how do the quizzes work? I know I have, maybe I should change this right now. It says quizzes and assignments. It's just quizzes. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second when I introduce myself. There's a reason. There's a scientific-ish reason why I decided to do it this way. This class is all about the word problems in the test bank. That's what we're doing. We're learning how to do these word problems, understanding why we're doing them. Each quiz you have unlimited attempts at. I want you to go through and get a good representation of the test bank, a variety of problems, variety of types of problems, because that's the best way you can prepare for the big points of the final at the end of the semester. So you have unlimited attempts, and your highest grade counts. I want it to be as user-friendly as possible on that front. For the final exam, it will be the same as the quizzes, just really big. So it's going to be through Canvas, the same thing as the quizzes. You're going to have, it's going to be proctored through Record Plus. Anybody feel really creeped out? I mean, when they're like staring at you through your camera? Yeah, I know. But it's what we have to do. At no cost right now. It's at no cost still. The university has toyed with the idea of, we're going to stop using that. But every time they say that, they later announce, we're going to use it for another semester. So luckily, this is still at no cost for the students. You can use a calculator. You're free to use a calculator. You also can use Excel on the exam. If you're using a calculator, yes, please plan on having a physical calculator if you're going to use one. I want to freak the proctors out if you're going through hunting for a program. Just Excel and the test. Use a physical calculator instead. And you can have some scratch paper and 1 page of notes, front and back. Normal 8.5 by 11 sheet. You can be handwritten or typed. So if you really want to get your focus on and get really small print and type out whatever you want, more power to you. All right, so the exam questions are drawn from the same exact test bank as the online quizzes. So preparing through taking multiple attempts of the online quizzes literally helps you earn points or increases the odds that you'll earn points for the final exam. And you're allowed 2 attempts at the final exam. All right, so that's my way of mitigating some of the risk for you. There's 35% of the grade in that final exam, and there's a highly stochastic element to the final exam in that you're randomly drawing questions from a test bank. There's no guarantee you won't get the hardest to you questions on your first attempt, and so I want to give you a second attempt with the idea that between the two you'll average out to about the average level of difficulty for the exams, and that'll be a better representation of your knowledge and your achievement in the class. The highest attempt, of course, counts. That would be cruel if I didn't do that, I think. You get 2 attempts, but one's just for fun. Okay, so let me talk about me a little bit. Oh, no, not yet. Schedule. We did the syllabus. Let's look at the schedule. So this is a Google Sheet. This is our 314.001 schedule. But if you're watching online, your 314.4001, which is the online 314 version, or your 513, you're in the 513 class, the schedule is laid out almost the same. So this week, we're going to go introduce the class, and we're going to start into Chapter 2. I think today we'll start into Chapter 2. And the assignment for that isn't due until the end of next week. So this is the one exception where we're going to go over some Chapter 2. In fact, all of Chapter 2 that we're going to cover is partly today and on Thursday, because we want some time to get to Chapter 3 next week. But we're going to make it due the end of next week. Usually it's due the week that we cover it. The reason for that is we almost always have some churn at the beginning of the semester. People add late, and I'm a little too lazy. So I don't want to go in there and be like, oh, you added late, so I got to extend your time. And let's just do week 2. It's simpler that way. So that said, don't next Friday be like, wait, I haven't started those quizzes yet. That's usually a recipe for disaster there. So don't put it off saying, oh, I'll get to it. Try to do it if you can. If you're here, allocate your time appropriately. All right, so that's it. This week we're doing Introduction and Chapter 2. Next week we'll start in Chapter 3, and it goes on. Now, Chapter 5 we split into 2 because we're going to go over the standard activity-based costing, ABC, in 1 week, and then we're going to add some advanced topics in the next week. And then we have 4 weeks of Chapter 4 because it's your favorite. It's process costing. So process costing has 2 flavors, weighted average, WA, and FIFO. And the calculations are slightly different. So we're going to start you out on a weighted average, going through the 3 steps across the 2 weeks. We're going to have 2 quizzes, Part 1 and Part 2 lectures as we go through weighted average. And then we're going to say, okay, well, now let's do all those 3 steps again if we were using FIFO. And we're going to do that for 2 weeks here. No. And I'm not actually familiar with any process costing that uses LIFO. Usually in the textbooks, they just present weighted average and FIFO, and I think there's some reasons for that. I get that question every once in a while. Yeah. No, we're just going over weighted average and FIFO. In fact, to be honest, I don't want to overspeak, but I'm pretty sure I don't think LIFO process costing exists. I know LIFO exists as an inventory. Right, I know it exists on financial statements. I'm looking back. I'm thinking to all the textbooks that I've ever had ever looked through for process costing. They just introduced weighted average in FIFO. So I don't want to say if it never exists in practice. Might be a company out there that tries to use it. Process costing LIFO. I know LIFO as a what I'm trying to say as a reporting rationale exists on financial statements, but as far as it being used in conjunction with process costing, it just doesn't seem to be prominent enough to be covered in any of the other textbooks I've kind of based my plan off of. Good question though, thank you. Yeah, so just those two types, weighted average and FIFO. We need to give ourselves some time for that. Some universities introduce process costing in the introductory class. Boise State usually does not. At least it hasn't for a good number of years. Anybody here? We've taken 206, right? All taken 206 in here, counting 206, or the equivalent. And maybe if your answer is the equivalent, then perhaps you'll have a different answer to this. Anybody gone over process costing before? A couple have. Did you take it? Did you take the 206 equivalent somewhere else?
Yeah.
Somewhere else? Okay, yeah. So some schools go over process, at least initial introduction to process costing. I know when I taught as a PhD student, you teach some classes to get yourself ready. So if you really want to do this thing about getting up in front of people and talking about accounting. When I taught some classes at my PhD school, we had a crash course in the basics of it in the intro class. That said, I can see why we don't here, because it's rough sometimes. For a good number of students, it's difficult to grasp at 206 level. So we're going to give us some time, some breathing room here for these 4 weeks. All right, we have 2 weeks of Chapter 7. Very similar to Chapter 5, we have the more traditional direct materials and direct labor variances our first week. More review than not, or at least of the two that's going to be reviewed, this is going to be reviewed more likely. And then the next week, we're going to go over overhead and mix and yield variances. Overhead variances and mix and yield variances. The more niche kind of variances, or at least less covered in the intro class. We have spring break, of course, and then we go over 2 weeks for Chapter 8 and 2 weeks for Chapter 10. So basically, after Chapter 3, everything is either 2 or more weeks every chapter. I'm going to give us some time to go through these. Chapter 8, we split it up kind of weird. We'll cover that when we get to it. These words have meaning. You just don't know what they are yet. Chapter 10, also, I split it up the way it makes sense to me. These are 3 fairly disparate topics: service department cost allocations, transfer prices, and these kinds of responsibility accounting metrics. But they don't follow quite the logic of Chapter 7 and Chapter 5. All right, I'll get out of the weeds of why I set the class up the way I did. And then we have the final exam here at the end. Last week. In fact, let me say something really quickly about this. Let me, first of all, troubleshoot a disparity. Oh, I see what I did. These numbers don't match what it says in the syllabus. It's 400 here and 420 there. Okay, the syllabus is out of date, unfortunately. Let me fix that. So I said 35% of your grade is that final. That was a tease. It's 40%. And I got your hopes up, I know. That's rule number 1. Don't set good don't never surprise you in a negative direction. That's what we're not supposed to do as professors, right? There go my evaluations. Well, just forget it. Okay, sorry. So 400 here, 400 here. That's the final exam. The timing of this, we're going to go over it later too. But they're really big about dead week. I'm not allowed to assign an exam during dead week, or some schools call it reading week, to be more professorial about it. Dead week is what that's. I think we should just call it what it is. You're feeling dead at the end of the semester. You're dead from studying, and kind of new material is dead. It's not no new material is being burst, if you will, in the class. So I'm not allowed to assign an exam during this week, and I'm not. But you are allowed to begin the final exam. At least one of you're allowed to take the final exam if you want, starting 4/24. So you have 2 weeks here, basically, to review for the exam, take an attempt, review what you got wrong, take more review quiz attempts, and take your second attempt. I want you to have, again, breathing room. I'm using that word a few times here. That's just kind of the mantra of the schedule. I want to have breathing room so you can improve upon your first attempt if you want to. So both the exam review quiz and the final exam are kind of just both in this week. They're not due till the end of those 2 weeks, which is 4th of May. And you can start both of them at least by the Monday of this first week here, the week 15, 4/24. Because they kind of go together is the idea. All right. I know what I did, and I messed myself up. It's not 400. This bottom is wrong. I encoded it into the cell, thinking I would remember later that I encoded it into the cell. That 50 points is the exam review quiz. So we're back to the original schedule. See, I just set it up so I could give you a good surprise later. See, it's actually back to 35%. So I need to fix this thing. Okay, so there we go. And I'll undo that business. All right. I know. When you learned for those few minutes that it was 40%, you rearranged everything. You're like 40%, carry the one, got to have more time and everything. And I'm sure it was. It's a big chunk either way, but luckily it's only 35% instead of 4%. You can take that as happiness for now. Okay, so yeah, sorry. This is what's due. These two, 350 plus the 50 for the review quiz. The review quiz works just like the other quizzes. Unlimited attempts, highest grade counts. It's longer than the other ones, so it's worth 50 points instead of 30. Also, I want to incentivize you to go through it as many times as possible, so I put more points on it because it's a bigger set of questions you're trying to review and get all in your head at the same time. Okay, questions on the syllabus or schedule? That's a good question. It's not a bad question at all. All right, let me go to Canvas here. They vary a little bit. 10, 6. So, sorry, 10 for Chapter 2. Chapter 3 actually has 2 quizzes. These two together are both due. They're worth 15 points each. So together, the Chapter 3 quiz is the 11 questions here. That's the high water mark for the quizzes. They go down and be 8, 9, 10, 7, 7, 7, 8. These two go together as well, but together they're 8 questions, 5 questions, and 3 questions. 10 questions, 7, 9. Each of these is a week, except for the times I pointed out that they go together. These two go together, and these two go together. So 11 for Chapter 3, and other than that, its highest is 10. 10 is really the highest. So they're not super long quizzes, but each problem is kind of a word problem. So there's some time commitment still, even with 10 questions. That's a great question. And that leads me, unintentionally reminded me of, these aren't available yet. So Chapter 6's 4 quizzes, right here, aren't available until February 1st. I'm giving myself a month here, the month of January, I should say, to renovate them. I'm revising them. I'm fixing them. I think I put that in the email, didn't I? That they're not available? Okay. In case any of you wanted, tomorrow to jump ahead to process costing, just so you know. But they will become available. If I'm done before February 1st, I'll make them available then. Likewise with these 2 quizzes right here for Chapter 7, the second week of Chapter 7. They're also not available yet. I'm giving myself some time to make some revisions or improvements or expansions of the test bank on this chapter. I like to take a chapter or two out every semester and take it to the shop and say what's working well, what's not working, and add extra questions and things like that. So chapter 6 and chapter 7, at least part of chapter 7, it's their turn. All right. So that's the syllabus and the schedule. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, that is a good question. All right, so and I don't have a definitive answer. I've done it a couple different ways. I got to make a decision real quick here because I didn't think through that yet. I think this is what I'll do. So I might have even had thought this and didn't write it down. But the first class, I'll make it required, as in you need to attend, so that I force you to do some review with me here in class. However, a number of you will find it more productive to review on your own or to just attack the quiz and the tests on your own. So the Thursday of that week, I'll make it so that you're all counted as being present, and I'll treat it like in-class office hours. And my promise is I'll be here at least for the first half hour. But if no one's here after the first half hour, I'll go. That's how I tend to treat those classes that I do that with. But if you're here and people asking questions, we'll go the whole time. That's fine. I'm happy to be here. But if you're not happy to be here, I'm going to go. This is the idea. Does that work? Anyway, if you're not here on that office hours day, then I'll leave after the first half hour. But I'll give you a window there, in case you got traffic or whatever, and you weren't able to get there at the first part of the class or whatever. So and also you'll get a free day that way too, as far as attendance. And you'll also be counted as present on finals week as well, because we're not going to use the window of time they've chunked out for us to come and do it in person. We're doing the exam online, so I'll kind of use present for that week as well. The attendance points are not the highest hurdle in the class here, so I'm trying to make it that flexible enough so that you're incentivized to come, but at the same time, you have opportunity to be sick inevitably, as we all are, or to spend time outside of class as well, studying, like the office hours the last week there. Okay, other questions about schedule or syllabus? Yeah.
How similar is the final exam review quiz and the final exam? Like, is it pulling from the same answer making stuff?
Yeah, I'm just making the review quiz shorter, fewer questions. So the exam will have the same proportions of questions as well, but it's just more of them. Yeah, it'll be statistically it'll be the same as the final exam, just shorter. But there's also a random element, of course. So that's why I want you to go through the review quiz a few times. So you get averaged across these several attempts of the review quiz, that's going to be like the experience of the final exam. Yeah.
After you take the quizzes, or after the due date of the quiz, will you be able to see if you got the answer right?
Yeah. If I haven't yet, I think I have already, but if I'll double check. You'll set up so you'll see which ones you got wrong. There's a big list I was going to make, but I think that's basically what it does. Lets me say which one you got wrong and which one. It lets me put down, give them the right answer right then. But I don't do that. Just the nature of the class. I can't just give away the answer for every question, or that will incentivize a very different kind of attempt at the questions, especially for the open answer ones. That I think might give away. Well, either of the types, multiple choice or open answer ones, which there are both versions of this. This isn't a question you asked, but building on that, there are two types of questions in these quizzes: multiple choice and open answer ones, where you've got to type in an answer out of the infinite number of answers, the numbers that there might be. Those are usually considered harder because it's an infinitesimal opportunity to guess at them. Whereas with multiple choice, you at least have a 25% chance of randomly guessing. But yeah, it'll show you which ones you got wrong. Yep. Good questions? Anything else? Yeah. They are not timed, no. It's a good question. Yeah, no, they're not timed, including the final. The time on the final is your bladder. That's the time limit on the final, because Record Plus will have its creepy camera on you as long as you want it to, and you're able to keep that session going as long as you want it to. It's a question of your endurance in that time. So that's usually one of the constraints. Or any other things like, oh, I got a roommate who's coming in 2 hours. I got to finish before whatever. Other constraints outside the test are usually what factor in time wise. Likewise, I think the quizzes are set up so you. I don't think the quizzes are set up so you have to complete them in one session. If they are, let me know. When I translated it from last semester to this semester, I think I got everything transferred over right, but it's possible I got some things that I didn't include. But the intention is for you not to have to take the quizzes all in one session. They're called quizzes because Canvas calls them quizzes, but they're homework basically. Many attempts at the homework is, if you want to prefer to think of it that way. The final exam you do have to do all at once, of course, one session. All right. So, any other questions real quick? Good questions. All right. So I included here, up there is a tab I'll go to in a second. So I wanted to introduce myself and let you know who I am. And I thought of Sun Tzu, The Art of War. This is a favorite of mine because he's a realist, like I consider myself to be a realist. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, I should tell them a lot about myself. Tell the students a lot about myself. And then I thought to I want to read it here. I'm smiling because it's a silly thought that I had here. And I thought, wait. Here's from The Art of War. It says, hence the saying, if you know your enemy and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And I thought, oh no, if I'm letting them know too much about me, then the students are going to take advantage of me. And I thought that, but then I said, no. If I express why I do things, at least from a research angle, Big Five personality type, for example, is the way I'm going to approach this, then perhaps it's a signal of a cooperative environment, and it'll help you switch games from competitive to cooperative, and that indeed will be beneficial to everybody. And then I thought of that same chapter. I don't like the translation of this version. When I first read The Art of War, is a different translation, but like everybody likes this Lionel Giles translation. Yeah, Lionel Giles. The highest form of generalship is to balk the enemy's plans. And the first translation I read of that one, it said to attack their strategy. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like I'm not gonna fight you. I'm gonna attack your strategy. So yeah, instead of occasionally there are students who are interested in, well, I'll try and get around the teacher. I'll try and take advantage of this, that, or whatever. Maybe I'll fight the strategy of that student by just being as an open book here, so that we're all on the same page. Maybe that'll help signal a cooperative game instead of a competitive game. So I like I'm doing a research paper right now on Big Five personality traits, and I think it's scientifically pretty sound. It's been around since at least the 80s, I think, if I remember where the literature started, and they found a lot of empirical evidence that this is at least one of the factors that plays into why we do things the way we do. These 5 factors of the big five factors of personality, and they're the orange, very very light orange. 4. Sometimes it's called ocean: openness, neuroticism. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. The point of is they're sometimes hard to understand what they mean because they were empirically derived. There's a big bunch of questions, and then they ask people a bunch of personality questions, this pool of personality questions without necessarily having for sure how they fit together. And then after people answered them, they statistically grabbed out which ones pooled together. And they said, oh, this set of questions right here, they all go together. People tend to answer this one high, they tend this one high. They answer this one high. So they must be together a type of personality, an aspect of personality here. And then they came up with a name afterwards of like, oh, well, they all kind of express agreeableness, and we'll kind of figure out what that means. They go together though. They're in alphabetical order here. So that basically agreeableness means the tendency to smooth the waters, to try to be looking out for the other person's interest, be other regarding, pro-social, things like that. And when I took the Big Five personality trait, I ended up in the 85th percentile of agreeableness. So I tend to be pretty high in agreeableness. Notice, so strategically speaking, that's one of the reasons why I don't grade any of your stuff. I think I'd be too lenient. They're all the word problems and quizzes in the test bank. It's Canvas grading you. I I'm not suited well to be a ruthless grader, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I've tried to work around that. High agreeableness is good in a lot of ways. Your business will like it if you're high in agreeableness, because then you'll agree to extra overtime for no pay. Yeah, they love that. Also, your friends will like it as well. You'll agree to go in on them. You'll agree to go get them, pick them up from the airport, things like that. So I thought, I can see how that makes sense. And it has two little aspects to it: compassion and politeness. Not going to necessarily drill those down too much, but conscientiousness. Who am I in conscientiousness? That is the obligation, attention to detail. So breaking it down might be a little more explanatory. The sub aspects of conscientiousness are one, industriousness, which is the tendency to work hard and do your duty, and two, orderliness, which is your tendency to dislike chaos and mess. So I added a new mistake. And when I saw that I came out like just very average on those, I thought, that makes a lot of sense. There have been times in my life when I've done a lot of work, I've worked very hard, and I've accomplished a lot. So for example, in 2012, I was working full-time in an accounting department at a Fortune 500 company. I was at a full-time master's program, and I did the CPA exam over that summer, and I just about died that year. But there have been times when I've worked really hard, other times when I haven't. Been pretty lazy. My dad's not quite like that. He tends to be a workaholic, so it's very. I don't see him take breaks very often. Maybe he feels guilty if he takes breaks or whatever. I tend not to have that. And so if I'm slow in getting back to you, just be like, that professor, he's just having one of his lazy times. So that's a forewarning. In fact, some of you might not like me because of that. Accounting involves a lot of details. And so people tend to self-select into it when they are relatively high in orderliness. And so some of you will say, "Man, you're too messy. You're disorganized, professor." And it's I'm sorry, I guess. That's just forewarning. That's just how it's going to be. Extroversion. So with extroversion, we have an idea of what extroversion means, right? Extroversion, extrovert, introvert. We know about that. Basically, tendency to, now they phrase it as tendency towards positive emotion. They put most of they being the psychologists over the years who have studied this, they put most of the traditional extroversion traits under the sub-trait of enthusiasm. Excitability from social influences and events. That's, outgoing, gregarious, good at parties, things like that. That's more what they're talking about. I'll get to that in a second. Look, I'm pretty low on that. And then assertiveness, the tendency to take charge. It's like, well, also socially and positive emotion, do you exercise that positive emotion in putting forward a positive vision for you and your group that's around you? And they put that under assertiveness. All right, so I have this really weird split. And when I got this result, I thought that is really weird. I'm supposed to be really low in enthusiasm and really high in assertiveness. But then I look back and I'm like, actually, I can kind of see how, at least to a degree, that makes sense. I tend to abhor these leadership vacuums that develop sometimes. And I'm like, well, somebody should figure out what we should do here. And I'm willing to take charge when necessary. But at the same time, I have a lot of introvert traits. And you're like, yeah, but you've been talking for an hour in front of us. That doesn't sound very introverted. I'll tell you how. Lots of pain medication. No, just kidding. No, instead, look, I'm not the most outgoing. I don't make friends the easiest. I don't necessarily, I'm not the best in a big social scene. I don't think quickly about how to repartee with people. But I succeed when I take a social situation and I turn it into one of my strengths. And I say, okay, well, I'm really high in the intellectual component here. I'm very interested in abstract things. Good for a professor doing research, which is all about abstract concepts, right? So how about I treat this as an intellectual game? So instead of being a social social encounter, can I accomplish some objective through wit and intellect or somehow? And I've been talking for an hour, but I've been talking about my academic topic. So yes, in fact, there are a number of professors in the college here that I know that are pretty introverted as persons, but something else in them draws them to teaching, and they've made it work pretty well. Also, if I can turn it into, well, how can I help you students? And then I can put my compassion forward, and it can be what's driving me towards presenting in class and doing well, doing better than I would if I considered it a social situation. All right, low neuroticism. Now you might think that's really good. Oh, you don't have a lot of negative emotions. Also means that sometimes I'm not very sensitive to risk. So maybe a little more anxiety would help me occasionally. I can look back and I can think, oh, you know what? Yeah, if I had been a little more anxious about that thing that I just jumped off the edge with, maybe I would have not jumped off the edge with that thing. And then, of course, I'm really interested in abstract thinking and in the academic realm in which I'm in. So I found a really good fit for me career-wise that way. So that also might irritate some of you. I am a professor. I am maybe a little too cerebral in my approach sometimes. I'll say 2. I put 2 as in I'm more than I should be. If I'm being too cerebral about something, you can point that out to me. I might just be blind to what I'm saying is filled with words that have a lot of meaning for me, because like it doesn't make sense to me, or at the very least, it doesn't make sense to me yet. All right, so that's a little bit more about me. Why I've set up the class the way I have, to try to take advantage of the best traits I have to bring to you, and avoid some of the possible downfalls. And we'll get started, I guess, on chapter 2 in the next lecture.